Hello everyone, this is Mark with a brief statement on behalf of the We Made This podcast network regarding Child's Play 3 before our episode of CHUCKYVISION covering it. We are hosted by British people on a British podcast network, and for those of you listening from outside of our country, you may not be aware of the controversy surrounding this film in the UK. On the 12th of February 1993, a 2-year-old boy from Kirkby in Merseyside called James Bulger was abducted, tortured, sexually assaulted and beaten to death by two 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and John Venables. It is one of the most shocking murders in British history. Post-trial, British tabloids claimed that the murder was inspired by Child's Play 3. The campaign was an echo of people holding on to the video nasty scandal in Britain in the 1980s. The tabloid's claim was strongly debunked by Inspector Ray Simpson of the Merseyside Police, and none of the fictional events in Child's Play 3 resembled the crimes committed by Robert Thompson and John Venables. However, there is a part of the UK population that is still understandably very raw on this matter, and we acknowledge their feelings and suggest that if this topic makes you uncomfortable, that you approach listening to this episode with caution. It is our hope that you will enjoy our continued celebration of this franchise, but we recognise that it would have been wrong to not address this matter when discussing Child's Play 3.
We made this.
Hello and welcome to CHUCKYVISION, the podcast right here on the We Made This podcast network about the Child's Play and Chucky franchise. My name is Mark Adams and I am your host, and with me at this time, as always, is my co-host Dev Elson. Hello, Dev.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
I'm alright. I'm, as always, quite excited to talk about Chucky, and there's always a good excuse to talk about Chucky because it's so fucking good.
Yeah, almost.
Or is it?
Or is it? Well, this will make a very interesting conversation today.
Yes, indeed. We are looking at widely considered to be the worst of the Chucky films, Child's Play 3.
Well, that's a contentious point because I think some would argue Seed of Chucky goes way too far and becomes the worst. But that film at least gives you things that you've never seen before. You know, Child's Play 3 does not have John Waters getting melted by acid.
It doesn't. It does have some interesting things, and it also has the tagline, "Look who's stalking," which that is on the front of the DVD box, and it does kind of contextualize what was going on in cinema at the time, doesn't it?
Oh god, yeah, the John Travolta movies, Christ.
John Travolta, Kirstie Alley, and the Talking Babies. Ah, dear me. Dear me. I loved those films as a kid. Having rewatched them relatively recently, don't love them anymore, they're cack.
Although, you know, it definitely brings up the image to me of a movie of a baby voiced by Brad Dourif.
Oh, good grief. Evil Look Who's Talking. Now that I would fucking watch.
Yeah, look who's stalking too.
Oh, don't. Brilliant. Mate, get that copyrighted. It's time to make our debut as directors and writers, and we could make $1 million.
Move over. Wait, am I getting the right Baldwin? Move over, Adam Baldwin. But this is the real Boss Baby, and it's Brad Dourif.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Fucking Boss fucking Baby. Ugh. Right, we're going to move on from Boss Baby and bad 80s and 90s films and talk about a bad 90s film. So, Child's Play 3 was released in 1991. It was only 9 months in real time after the release of Child's Play 2. However, there was an 8-year gap in film, and Andy has grown up. It was 90 minutes, and it had an 18 rating, making it the first 18-rated Child's Play film.
That is wild that it's considered more, because I don't know if it necessarily does bring more than the last two did.
So, I think some of the violence, whilst doesn't impress me as a horror fan, is a little more explicit. So, I don't know, compare the schoolteacher murder, where it's all in your imagination, to the explicit razor blade across the throat and then the blood gushing out of the throat. I think there is a difference in the violence in this film.
True, yeah, that is a particularly nasty one.
See, it didn't do very much for me. I like my deaths to be elaborate, and it doesn't matter how gory they are. But I think, as the BBFC would look at it, that is more violent and more shocking than the beating with the ruler that I used as a comparison. And I much prefer the beating with the ruler death. I thought that was really, really well done.
Yeah, I think maybe the way I'm thinking of it is because I know the BBFC can be, the BBFC and also what's the American equivalent? The Censors Board. But
yes,
I remember when The Conjuring got, I think The Conjuring is an 18, and they were like, what can we edit out to make it lower because we want to go for a big box office? And the censors were like, nothing. The whole film is just so intense. Like, it's too intense for younger people to watch. And that's sort of how I look at this film. Like, it's just nowhere near as tense as the first two. So that's why I feel like I don't know why it's rated more.
Yeah, I think perhaps what you're actually saying is that the priorities of the BBFC are different in 2021 compared to what they were when Child's Play 3 was released. And I think that's actually quite a astute observation, actually.
They definitely did go hard on... And again, we pointed this out with Child's Play 2 being particularly bloodless, on whether the company was consciously trying to avoid the fate of other films, because I know they went... It's a long saga of the Friday the 13th getting slaughtered by the censors and having to cut so much out. You know, a few of those middle ones around the late 80s and 90s are quite bloodless because, like, every scene had, like, seconds, like, shaved off it. So I don't know if they were trying to avoid the same fate.
You know, some of the weird shit that was going on in the 90s when it came to the censors. I remember being a fan of Manga Entertainment's imported anime, and a lot of the stuff that they cut was the violence. But having seen the uncut versions, I'm like, really? What? Why? You rated it 18 anyway, despite the fact that you insisted on these cuts. So I think there is more sophistication and thought behind the way the censors work now compared to what we were looking at in the 90s.
Definitely, yeah. And yeah, that is a weird point, because aside from that really cool neck slice, it is kind of odd that these films for a long time would have the special effects be so focused on just getting the doll to work that they were kind of ignoring what other slashers at the time were putting all their special effects into, which was the elaborate kills.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. And we'll talk about the budget. It was 13 million, which was the same as Child's Play 2. However, this only made 20.5 million. Didn't double its budgets, and I think it's a real diminishing returns, which is something that was, up until recently, ignoring the MCU, a kind of acknowledged norm, but that's quite a drop in how much this made on a box office, and I think it would have probably been considered a flop.
Yeah, well, I imagine critically it was a flop as well, so It was just sort of a definition of a dud, really. It didn't necessarily offend anyone in terms of the same way as like people may talk about, Seed of Chucky, like what have they done to this franchise? Where are they going? This is just this is just sort of a sad realization of like, oh, they've ran out of ideas. Like, why do this?
And the reality is, the first film had more than double that box office. And yeah, you can see why there was a break between Child's Play 3 and Bride of Chucky.
Yeah, I mean, to get into some of the details, not plot details yet, but like, I mean, it feels, even though it's the same, it's strange because it's the same budget as 2. It definitely feels markedly different than 2. I almost said that 2 kind of has a almost direct-to-DVD feel to it in terms of like how small scale it is within that house. But this, particularly, the director was Jack Bender, who at this point had not done a lot. He had mainly done TV, and he is mainly known for TV now. He's got a bunch of credits. He did like a lot of Lost. Like, he's got like 40 episodes or so of Lost. He worked on The Sopranos. He worked on Game of Thrones. And what's so strange about that is all of those later shows, all those modern shows, look so much more cinematic than this feature film does. I feel like at this point, Child's Play 3 feels like a made-for-TV movie.
Yeah, and I mean, eventually that is how the franchise ended up, with the last 2 of the run of 7 before the remake. But I think to some extent that is fair. And it's got a 23% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't think that's fair. I enjoyed this film more than 23% personally. How do you feel about that rating? Do you think it's fair?
I enjoy aspects of this film, but I believe in general my opinion is like it feels like a much smaller and flatter film. I feel like the biggest disappointment is that they rushed Don Mancini so fast that he didn't get a chance to put much creativity into it. I made this point about Child's Play 1, but I stand corrected now that Child's Play 3 is the straightest of all the movies, because there's no real camp elements or like just flourishes. It's very by the numbers. It feels like it was written by someone else, like just trying to copy the formula.
It does feel like a kind of sequel cliche in as much as I don't know why I'm going to use this as an example, but it's the first one that came into my head. Leprechaun in the Hood, where you've run out of ideas. You've got a character that people like, a baddie that people have kind of got attached to, but you've done the film so many times, it's time to put them into a different scenario. So Leprechaun in the Hood, Leprechaun in space. And this feels a bit like Chucky at military camp. They just found a scenario and dropped Chucky into it, like those Leprechaun films.
Precisely. I would say that Leprechaun in the Hood is surprisingly okay, but Leprechaun in Space, Leprechaun in Space, despite being a silly concept, is quite surprisingly boring. And also, I believe Brad Dourif is in that.
Inevitably. But just the name Leprechaun in the Hood, it is the most ludicrous thing.
Well, I mean, until Leprechaun Back to the Hood.
I didn't even know there was Leprechaun Back to the Hood.
Yeah, there was 2 Hood movies.
We're talking about Leprechaun. Let's not do a podcast about Leprechaun.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up your point about getting into the plot now. Like, yeah, it's Chucky, or more specifically Andy, in military camp now, going to military school. And, I mean, one, it's kind of a boring environment. Like, it's a pretty drab, very serious environment that doesn't allow for much fun. And also, it's kind of a big, especially when we're watching them so consecutively, it's kind of a big fuck you, because 2 ends on this great note of Kyle and Andy going out into the world together, And they just completely
Yeah.
do that. And there's no character in this that is really as cool or fun as Kyle. They're all, and again, because of the consequences of setting it in military camp, they're all kind of boring.
Yeah.
Like the love interest of Kristen is so, it's just so boring.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fairness in what you say there, and obviously, as this was 8 years later, so technically, I suppose this was probably set in 1998. The setting of a military school was at least something comfortable that you could say that could have happened in 1998. There was no major changes like, people had started having mobile phones in 1998, and they couldn't have predicted that when they made it in 1991. So I think it was cautious in a weird way, because of the way they were setting it. I just don't know why the fuck they did that. Why suddenly make Andy 16 years old?
Yeah, it seemed like they were trying to avoid the problem of making it too similar. Like, it's just going to be young Andy being chased by Chucky again. And so they wanted to make him a bit more mature to do something with the character. But then the problem is they don't really do too much with the character. The new actor is not Alex Vincent, obviously. It's Justin Whalen, who I think most people recognize him as Jimmy Olsen from Adventures of Lois and Clark. Yeah, but
definitely Jimmy Elson.
He's not bad in the performance. I mean, no one in this film is particularly bad, but as we said with Child's Play 2, there's an automatic sympathy and empathy with Andy because he is a small child and he's pretty good at the role. He emotes and he brings out emotion in the character. And Justin Whalen is he's just there, really, sort of reading the lines. He doesn't bring much to it. And I don't think there's much to the character for him to bring.
No, I think you're fair that he doesn't do a bad job with not much to play with. I think it's probably a fair way of...
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And the original idea for this, again, I'm quite happy to say I get my information from Wikipedia, but the original idea for this was multiple dolls, which was scrapped because of budgetary reasons, and that became Cult of Chucky.
Yes, it did. It took them a while to finally conceive that. And that's, again, what I mean in retrospect as a disappointment. Like, Don Mancini was still creative, and he still wanted to be creative, and they just slapped this arbitrary 9-month production trap on him.
Yeah.
And it just didn't give him any room to, have fun with the series.
Yeah, but I am glad that they did get to eventually use that idea and, embrace his creativity rather than stifle him.
Precisely, yeah. I mean, I think probably it's time to hear some of your more positive points. But again, I don't think this film is absolutely terrible, but yeah, it's stifled. It's stifled. The whole thing is stifled.
Yeah. I would absolutely agree with that. I'm not going to sit here and do that thing where you kind of manipulate everything to make it sound 100 times better than it is. But I do think there's some merit to this film, and I did enjoy watching it.
Yeah.
Would you say you enjoyed watching it, or had you had enough by this point?
Well, I'm never going to have enough of Chucky. I mean, I feel like there is aspects to enjoy about it. Yeah, there's moments to enjoy about it, but as I say, for me, there's long gaps. Like, I mean, the character of Shelton, the bully, Commander, the older guy. I feel like moments like that, I just don't need. Let's hear about some of the positives. Yeah. What are some things you do like in this?
Well, I'll tell you what. Before I do that, I want to share another hot fact.
Oh, okay.
Did you see who the first choice of director was for this film?
I did see it. It was Peter Jackson, wasn't it?
It was. Hot off the bad taste kind of roller coaster. They wanted Peter Jackson.
This was 90... The Frighteners was, the next year? 92?
Yeah, I think so.
God, yeah, that's what I mean. This film could have been... God, this film could have been so different with him at the helm.
It could. It really could. So, all right, we'll go. We will start and look at some of the positive stuff. I have previously complained on this podcast about the lack of iconic theme for the Chucky franchise. And I got nothing from Child's Play. I got nothing from Child's Play 2. But the theme for Child's Play 3, I have unashamed affection for 90s cheesy tap music in horror films. And I feel like they could have emphasized the theme that they had for Child's Play 3 as the franchise's theme, because I thought it was a great theme.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I did like the music in 3. I mean, I like the music in 2 as well, but no, 3 did have a good soundtrack. The soundtrack helped elevate it a little bit from its flatness. It made it a bit more theatrical.
Yeah, and I think the soundtrack was great and atmospheric in both 1 and 2, but the theme, I didn't find myself enjoying the main theme, whereas in this one felt like they might actually have a theme that they might reuse. And I liked it. And I feel like it's probably a strength that has continued through all 3 films, that the lore is uncomplicated, and there was no convoluted, elaborate explanation or justification about why Chucky was alive again. Just drip a bit of his blood in. There he goes, off he goes. Get on with the doll killing. And I think I kind of like that. I feel like that is what I want from Chucky. I don't need an elaborate expansion of the lore.
Yeah, I definitely can't criticize Child's Play 3 for that, because that's what I said was a strength in Child's Play 2, is that it's a retread on the first film, but that's what we wanted, more of the first film, and so that's what the second one delivered. And to a degree, that's what the third one delivers as well. I mean, I don't think it's as strong as an opening with him being rebuilt and everything, because, I mean, we don't really see him get rebuilt. It's just sort of this figurative, metaphorical, like, goop and stuff that reforms him, which is, it's a neat opening.
Yeah, I think it would be wrong to suggest it's as strong as an opening as Child's Play 2. It was quicker and even less focused on it. It was just like, we need Chucky back very quickly. Let's just find a way. Bish, bash, bosh, off we go. Child's Play in a fucking military camp.
Yeah, well, we get the whole prologue. Again, we get this whole strange prologue because we need to know how the company is doing that owns the good guy dolls. We get the death of Mr. Sullivan, the CEO, which seems really quite disconnected from the rest of the film, really.
I think it was just an opportunity for a cool kill in a lot of ways.
It is, yeah. It's a fun sequence, yeah, and it definitely gives it a chance to Chucky to get right into it, killing and stuff. So it's definitely not a bad thing. It's it's a good opening.
I'm always happy when evil corporate capitalists are the murder victims in these kind of things. And I don't know. I shouldn't be pleased at the death of someone, but these are fantasy situations, aren't they? And if there was going to be a murderous doll rampage, you'd want them to be killing bastards like him.
Yeah, they definitely do make him a bit more heelish in this, because I mean they were moving on. They were simply moving on from the events of the first film and the second one. And this one, they have the little slideshow. They have the world's smallest, shortest slideshow, because they show a picture of Andy and then a picture of Charlie Ray, and that's it for the demonstration. And then, Mr. Sullivan is like, Andy Barclay's history. No one will remember him. No one cares about him, which is a strange foreshadowing, because then Andy would not be in the next film.
Good point. Well made. Yeah.
It seems like a weird line to lampshade its own movie, because it's like, it's not even Andy, it's like a different actor as an older Andy. It's like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, I get that they needed to age Andy, but it would have been nice if they'd have aged him naturally, and we could have had Alex Vincent playing an adult Andy.
We could have had the boyhood of the horror genre.
Yeah.
Took 12 years to make this Chucky sequel.
Yeah, if we ignore Child's Play 3, we kind of have, because we got
Alex
Vincent playing Andy in Chucky as this kind of vigilante type situation, because he's so fucked up about what happened to him as a kid. And I think that's really, really cool. It's a bit like Ash versus the Evil Dead, isn't it? Where Ash, they acknowledge, he's old and he's completely and utterly fucked up by what happened to him 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, no, there's a good point. Yeah. So this is something I noticed in Child's Play 2, and I was thinking about it, and then when I watched Child's Play 3, I was like, are they doing something with this? With Child's Play 1, Roger Ebert gave it a good review, which was quite rare for him to give a horror movie a good review. And in Child's Play 2, I wondered if they were trying to pander to him because the delivery truck that Chucky gets into is the Chicago Sun-Times, which is what Roger Ebert wrote for.
Wow.
And I thought like, oh, it's set in Chicago. It's just a coincidence. But then in the Chucky 3 opening, the one board member in the meeting who is saying that they should stop making Chucky dolls and stop doing this, he looks conspicuously like Roger Ebert.
Oh dear. I suspect you're reading too much into it, but I hope you're not, because that would be fascinating if it was.
This is a moment of it's like the Godzilla movie when Roland Emmerich put the mayor and the mayor's assistant to look exactly like Ebert and Siskel. I think it's a weird meta moment.
Brilliant. I hope you're right. I really hope you're right. So the setting of the military school, for me, I think military school settings are pretty unpleasant anyway. I find the whole kind of bullying culture of young kids being treated like soldiers pretty scary, to be honest with you. So I think as a setting, with the restrictions that are put on the main protagonists, I think it's actually quite a good setting for a horror film, actually.
It is a good setting for a horror film, yeah. And I feel like, again, it's that turnaround that kind of neuters it, the effectiveness of it. I feel like, and I'm with Andy, it's a living hell. With his roommate Whitehurst, it's he's already been living through this hell. But then it's a little inconsistent because Kristen has her own sort of attitude. When she calls Shelton an asshole, and so she sort of skirts around it, and it's not as bad for her. But then you've also got this really inconsistent style of the little boy Tyler, and for him, military school is like his own house. He's just running around playing hide and seek, playing with dolls. It seems to be a completely different world for the younger kids.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that. And we'll talk about this now. You mentioned Tyler. I wasn't particularly chuffed with the stereotype of the black kid stealing.
I didn't even pick up on that, but yeah, that never really comes up, does it? That he took the package that was meant for Andy.
Yeah, I think...
Again, that's what I mean about him, it doesn't seem like military school for him. He can just take other people's stuff, and there seems to be no consequences for him.
I think there was quite a lot of consequences for him, actually. He nearly got fucking murderized.
Wow. he met Chucky, yeah.
But you're right, no consequences via the military school.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to... This is a line that is on par with the I've got a date with a 6-year-old boy. If you want to talk about the race of Tyler... It is such a funny line when Chucky announces to Andy that he doesn't need Andy anymore because Chucky's going to be a bro. And he puts his little doll fist up.
And I think it is okay for the bad guy to be racist. I don't want things to be watered down in as much as you can't even portray racism as a bad thing anymore. But yeah, that did make me cringe. And establishing that Charles Lee Ray is a racist is fine with me. I think that that's actually quite a nice little thing to make him, he's fucking evil. So he's bound to be prejudiced as well,
Well, here's the interesting thing though. I kind of thought it was the opposite in a way, because if Charles Lee Ray was racist, he wouldn't want to live out his life as a young black man, would he? But he wants to go into Tyler's body, so he's fine with it.
Yeah.
In the same way that later in the series he would go into a woman's body. He seems strangely at ease with this sort of body swapping identity politics.
Yeah, I get that, but I also think a white guy using the term bro
No,
ironically,
definitely, it is cringe. Yeah, it is.
it's a bit
awkward.
racist. You know, he's racist, but you know, a body's a body. Don't matter if it's black, white, or a woman by the sounds of things. But yeah, I think he is still massively racist.
Yeah, it is. I guess it's contextually problematic in the sense that no matter what body he's going into, he's going to continue murdering people. So that isn't really a good image for whoever he goes into.
But no, I've always said that it is okay for the bad guys to be prejudiced. It's when the protagonists that you're supposed to identify with are racist or homophobic or whatever. That's when I have a problem with it. And a lot of 80s and 90s stuff does that.
I think outside of that mention, no one else mentions Tyler's race at all, really.
No, not at all. And another thing that I think is a positive is it's not particularly sophisticated, but it's relatively sensitively dealt with, that it's clear that Andy has PTSD.
Yeah, that point before that we made, that Whalen isn't particularly brilliant in the role, but he definitely is doing what he can with what Mancini brings into it, which is, the character definitely is still struggling with the after effects of Chucky, even more so than I'd say in Child's Play 2, in which Andy almost seems to be over Chucky in the way that he faces off against him. But in this, even though, like, this is what I mean. Like, if this film had more time to have like rewrites and like fixes and stuff, this could have been a strong element of Andy growing up into an adult, because you know the Colonel says that really generic line of like, you know, like, put away childish things, now I'm a man, and that's I think that's an aspect to Andy's character here, that he is no longer a little child, but he's still you know, this is real trauma, and he's going to carry that into adulthood.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that they even bother to acknowledge it in 1991 is to the film's credit.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same way why it's kind of a shame that they have to like move on from elements like Karen or Kyle so quickly, because you know now Andy had that sort of protection away from the adults, that, you know, he's just a kid, you know, he's going to be fine and he's going to go into a new family. But now he's in military school, he's more independent, and he's more, you know, he has to stand on his own 2 feet now. He doesn't have anyone to support him.
And I think, again, there's an element that this child is traumatized, this child struggled to get foster parents. This is where he would end up.
Yeah.
Poor sod.
It's a good environment to explore that character, or at least define that character a little bit in its next chapter. And again, it's the shame why these movies end so abruptly, because it's skipping to the ending, you know. Like, he just says to Kristen, you know, don't worry, I've been here before, as he gets put into a police car. It's kind of a really sad, depressing ending. Like, what's going to happen to him in this next chapter of his life?
Yep, it's 3 in a row. Abrupt ending after elaborate amount of Chucky death. And we're 3 for 3.
Yeah, it's, you know, hopefully we'll see what the Chucky series does and how much it explores where Andy's been all these years.
So, I will defend this line to my grave. It is one of my favourite lines in all of cinematic history. This is my rifle. This is my gun. This is for shooting. This is for fun. I will defend that line forever and ever. I think it's fucking ace.
Yeah, it's a great line, and it's emblematic of what the film could have gone towards more, because when you think of like military films like Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket and stuff, part of the fun is like, part of the fun, I mean, they're not exactly fun movies, they are depressing movies, but it's that military stomping down of personality, you know, turning them into emotionless people capable of killing. But then that sort of pushes out the more extreme personality traits. And so you do get elements of that in this. The weird characters. There are elements in this.
So, I could probably defend this film a little bit more. I genuinely did enjoy this, and I genuinely think that 23 on Rotten Tomatoes is a bit harsh. But do you want to do your smash this to pieces thing now?
Well, I've already been kind of smashing it to pieces, just in general, like, just how lifeless it is. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I agree with you that there are positives. I did like the Tyler aspect of the story in inviting this new protagonist in, even though he's not really the protagonist. But I did enjoy the aspect that Andy was no longer needed from the start, and because Chucky introduced himself to a new person, which updates the voodoo nonsense. I feel like that's a good aspect of the story.
Yeah, and I think the kind of growing up of Andy and being almost like a big brother figure to this kid I think that's a really nice element. And for the first time in Child's Play, kind of, for me, all the bastards die, and it's become a little bit more kind of, I guess, horror cliche. Look at me criticising the film I said I was going to defend. But, the barber dies, the bully dies, and there's a good guy sacrifice. All of these are a little bit horror cliche. And I don't mind that. I like horror films.
Yeah, I don't mind that. And I will say, to the defense of the film, those 3 moments you mentioned, we can go into more detail about each one. Those 3 moments I felt were good, the quote-unquote baddies. Shelton I didn't quite really like as just the bully character. He was a bit boring. But when the finale happens, I felt, a bit sad for him, because the scenario that Chucky set up was, kind of a tragic one. And like I said about insane characters before, I mean, Andrew Robson, who horror people might know from Hellraiser, or not really horror, but he was very good as Serpico, the killer in Dirty Harry. He brings like a wild intensity to that barber character, which was quite enjoyable.
Yeah, I think you're right about the actors managing to do actually a better job than I think they're probably given credit for.
Yeah, especially near the end. I think the specifics of the finale setup, where Chucky switches. So they're having the big paintball game, red versus blue, but Chucky switches over the red paintballs for real live rounds, and I feel like that sets up a really interesting situation, and it does pay off because you get a number of kills that are not particularly emotionally investing, but felt something. I didn't feel bored. Shelton was a bully, but it felt a little sad that he got killed that way.
I think it's Shelton's age that makes it tragic. He could become a better person as he gets older. He's only like 17, 18, and you can become much, much better as you get older. And I think any character, regardless of whether or not they're a bit of a shit, killed off in their prime, that is a horror thing of this entire 40, 50, 60 years of this young person's life has been stolen from them. And I think that's where the tragedy comes, even from the bully's death.
Yeah, and then that quickly follows into the chaos of, them, another one of the cadets fighting Andy, and everyone's arguing, and then Chucky pulls the pin out of a grenade, and we get this selfless sacrifice of the character of Whitehurst, who, again, like Shelton, I didn't think that Whitehurst was a particularly interesting character through most of it. He was just sort of like the nerd who gets bullied. But
yeah,
they save his character at the end because he makes this really selfless sacrifice. And I did feel something for the character because the film does put an emphasis on the reality of the situation, that, these are young people getting killed off so soon in their lives and stuff. And I feel like there's a genuine, whatever the names are, these other cadets who are no nonsense, all serious, kind of, other bullies to Andy and stuff. They're all genuinely panicked and confused and scared of what's going on.
In a lot of ways, I think this is more classic slasher than the first 2 films because of the age of the people that are getting murdered.
Yeah, it does feel quite different. I wish this aspect was drawn out a bit more. Like we had gotten to this sooner and like spent more time in the woods with these people, rather than it be forced into the ending and then have most of the film be set up. Because, as you say, like, I wish we could spend more time with these younger characters because, like, some of the people who get killed off are a lot of them are quite old, really. Because we have like Mr. Sullivan, the old CEO. We have an old garbage truck driver who gets crushed, which is a good sequence, but he's just a random guy. We get the colonel who gets killed off, and he's again. He literally dies from a heart attack. He's that old.
You see, I liked that death.
I did enjoy that death. It was quite funny.
I think the disappointment of Chucky not getting to be murderous was such a delicious little thing that really, again, emphasizes the cruelty and glee of Charles Lee Ray. And I think it does make sense that if someone that age with a dicky ticker saw an evil doll going, am I going to do a murder? You probably would have a fucking heart attack. And I just feel like the character of Charles Lee Ray is really well done here. He is malicious and gleeful in his hatred and his murder. He clearly enjoys it, but also he attempts to be devious with the plan that you talked about with replacing the bullets for the paintballs. And it's a well thought out plan, but the character we know is fucking impatient and he gives up on the plan halfway through that could have done a lot more murdering for him.
It was a very strange sequence, that of him, but like, it's a strange nitpick because, I mean, the film, I mean, I'd say it's quite a valid nitpick because the logic of it is that they had all these rifles for a paintball game that they preloaded several days in advance with seemingly only one round of paintballs. And then on the day, everyone would go out without checking their guns to see what kind of ammunition is in them and would just start firing willy-nilly. And then even then, I guess, as it plays out, Chucky does get one kill from it. But, like, even if they started firing these live rounds off, like, they're going to have to it's just such a weird setup that they would preload all these guns with one paintball.
Oh, okay. Good point. Well made.
It just seems
shit. You are right.
It just seems like such a bizarre setup that they had to, skirt around the logistics of it. But again, for the sake of the movie, I do agree with you. It's a really fun and unique setup for Chucky to get some violence, like some chaos out of it. I think I just wish it had played out a bit longer, a bit more explored with it, because once it happens, it's a great moment when Shelton gets shot, and it's it is sort of engaging. But once it happens, they realize what they've done and they stop shooting, and then Chucky just runs away, and that whole build up is it just ends.
Yeah, fair cop. So I am going to point out a little bit of ick. So Charles Lee Ray, about 40, so he's about my age. And he gets all turned on seeing teenagers having a snog. And he's really jealous of the fact that Andy gets to kiss the girl. And I'm like, really? That's a bit yucky, that is, mate. But, again, bad guy. It is okay for him to be creepy as fuck. He is the bad guy. If that was, I don't know, a hero cop that was there to save the day, observing that and behaving like that, that would be completely different. But yeah, a bit icky, that.
I think that scene feels awkward because it's an aspect that I think neither Chucky or Andy have ever expressed any sexuality in these movies until now. It's not being explored, it's just referenced, and it's like, wait, what?
Yeah, I think it was crude more than anything, and not very well thought out. I get what they're trying to get at, that there's an element of, I can't have sex because I'm a doll, I want to have sex.
Well, that doesn't stop them in later films.
Well, okay. But at this point, and I feel like it could have been done in a more, I don't know, he sees what the Colonel having sex or something, you know?
Yeah, or even just I don't know, just explored a bit better, because it's like that moment for Andy is meant to be like this is his presumably his first kiss, and it's with a character that we don't really know. Really, it's just Kristen. It's just who, it's just someone he met like a couple days ago.
Yeah, true. I really liked, even though it was massively cliched, the setting of the ghost train.
I'm not going to gripe about it, because I mean it comes out of nowhere, considering the whole film is set in military camp and now we're in a theme park. But
yeah,
it's a really fun climax.
Yeah, I think so too. And I love me a rotary fan death.
It's definitely not as prolonged as Chucky's other deaths, but it is still viscerally entertaining to watch.
Yeah, I think for me, this film is flawed. The plot relies on coincidence so fucking much. There's very little that it adds to the franchise and the lore, other than, like I said, putting it in a new setting. And the deaths are a little bit underwhelming, despite the fact that it's actually gone up to an 18. I don't feel like they were quite as creative as the first two. I don't feel like the 18 rating added anything or gave us more. But I'll be damned if I didn't sit down for 90 minutes and enjoy this film.
Yeah. If you gave me a binary of did I enjoy it and did I not enjoy it, like, yeah. I've seen Child's Play 3 before, and I watched it again for this. And if, in eventually, if I go through the movies again, I'm not going to skip this movie. It could almost be the one movie that I would skip. But then if I'm only going to skip one movie, what's the point in that? It's 90 minutes. I'll watch it, and it's got some entertaining value to it. So, yeah, if I had to say, yeah, I enjoyed it too.
Bloody hell.
It's disappointing. It's underwhelming, but yeah, it's not terrible.
Yeah, and I think underwhelming is fair, but I don't think it's cripplingly so. I don't think it's completely unwatchable. I think it's a fun, slightly below average slasher.
Yeah, that's what I would put it with. It feels, when people talk about the classics, it's like, well, you look at the Nightmare on Elm Street or like the Halloween franchise in particular. Halloween is an all-time classic, but Halloween 4 or 5, it's not going to compare at all. It's definitely when Halloween to Halloween 5 is a massive step down, but if you just watch Halloween 5 on its own, it's fine, it's okay, and that's what this film is. It's a step down, but it's still okay.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I will say the only weird line that I thought was strange was when Andy goes to find Tyler during the paintball game. And then when he disappears, when Shelton learns that Andy's disappeared, he's like, that goddamn traitor, he's doubling for the Reds. And I don't know if that's a thing you can do in military camp. Like, what kind of maneuver is that? What kind of maneuver is that to showcase to the superiors that, like, yeah, in a real life environment, I would become a traitor. That's such an odd move for Shelton to think that that's what Andy's doing.
I mean, unless he's been told to by the Colonel to give them a scenario that they can react to.
That's what I mean. That's the only thing that would make sense. But, like, one of the cadets genuinely becoming a traitor for the purpose of a game is so bizarre.
Yeah, absolutely right. So, this film, it only has Andy from the first two in it, if we ignore the CEO. And it has these two quite significant new characters of Tyler and De Silva that survive. We don't see Tyler or De Silva again at all, and they haven't been announced for, like, cameos in Chucky either. And I think that's a shame. I think I would like to know what happened, particularly to Tyler. I can love or leave De Silva, but I'd like to know what happened to Tyler. I think he is going to be traumatized, and I'd like to know how this kid who kind of inherited this horror from Andy, I'd like to know how that's affected his life as well.
That is a good point. There's been no mention of them coming back, because as I imagine, I feel like maybe Don Mancini doesn't really want to retread into like Child's Play 3 stuff. But yeah, as a fan, I kind of do want to, at the very least, not as a character, but like, I just want to hear about what happened to these people.
Yeah. Even if it's just like Karen, who she's in a mental asylum, oh dear. I think that would be something that I would like to see. I do feel like this film is slightly bashed to the point where I did get quite attached to Tyler and De Silva, and I think they were strong enough to at least be acknowledged as this franchise has clearly got legs, that, these characters were significant at one point.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look at it the same way with Child's Play 2, I feel like Kyle is mainly only really coming back because people liked that character. Like, narrative-wise, why is she coming back? I mean, she knew Andy for like a weekend, and then evidently from Child's Play 3, she left Andy. So, I mean, if she's coming back, then why wouldn't these other characters come back?
Maybe Series 2.
Maybe, yeah.
I say that now. If we're really disappointed with the TV series, I'll be eating my words. But I just don't think we're going to be disappointed by this TV series. I think it's going to be lots and lots of fun.
No, because I feel one of my points of disappointment was that this film didn't get to explore what it was trying to. And with the screen time available on a TV show, Mancini's going to be able to explore every aspect he wants to. So we'll probably get more character. We'll get more character to Andy and more reason why characters like Kyle are coming back.
And I think maybe there's an element of me being impatient here. I think if Chucky is successful, we might see Tyler and De Silva come back. You've got to remember something like Star Trek Picard. We haven't seen Geordie LaForge. We haven't seen Worf. And we're not going to in Series 2, but we are going to see Guinan in Series 2, who we didn't see in Series 1 when we've seen Riker and Troy already. So maybe there's a little bit of kind of slowly catchy monkey, give everyone what they want, but not immediately. So maybe we will see Tyler and De Silva in Series 2, maybe.
That is a very good point. I mean, with franchises like that, the more obscure a character is, if you bring that back, the hardcore audience will love it, just because it shows that the creators like know even the nerdiest of stuff. So I feel like like bringing back a character from Child's Play 3, I feel would get that same effect of people like, I didn't like that movie, but like they're paying attention to the details, so that's cool.
Yeah, and I think there was an element of grumpiness that a character like, for example, Hugh was brought back in Picard before they brought back Geordie LaForge. But no, I like that. I like how this character that was quite peripheral and only in like 3 or 4 episodes of Next Gen has become more important in the time between when we saw him and in Picard. And I think that there is stuff to be played with on that. Maybe Tyler could be like a really important character who has revealed all of the found a way to prove the truth of the Chucky dolls and stuff like that. I doubt it, but maybe.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, the more characters that know about Chucky, the more they can work together. So, we'll maybe see some of that, yeah.
So, Dev, I hope I've maybe convinced you a little bit that Child's Play 3 isn't unsalvageably bad. As always, I've had a great time chatting about it because this franchise, man, it's just the best, even when it's shit.
Well, yeah, precisely. If this was the lowest point, then I still had a good time. And it's really only up from here. So that's great.
So, Dev, where can people find you on the internet?
If you want to find me on Twitter, I am at Absolute Travesty, and from there you can find, wherever else I am. I have a Twitch, twitch.tv/shootthatnebula, if that's the correct URL. Yeah. And that's pretty much it. If you want to listen to my old Friday the 13th podcast, then that's Forever Friday on various podcast networks. And that's me, really. And for you, Mark?
Yeah, so if you're looking for me, I'm at Mark Adams HC on Twitter and Instagram. I'm on lots and lots of podcasts on the network and elsewhere. I like podcasts. I like guesting on them and I like hosting them. If you're interested in a podcast where I've talked about horror in the past, it's not running anymore, but you can check out Super Tap Film Club. If you're interested in me talking about tattoos, you can check out Ink Stories. I regularly appear on Podcast 616, which is the We Made This Network's podcast about the Marvel MCU. And I'm all over the place. Shipwrecked and Comatose is my Red Dwarf podcast. There's loads. And yeah, I'm not going to go through it all every single episode because that's really conceited. But if you're looking for any of the podcasts that we have talked about, just search for them wherever you're listening to Chucky Vision because they'll all be there. So thank you very much for joining us for this episode of Chucky Vision. And until next time, wanna play? Chucky Vision is a podcast brought to you by the We Made This Network. Follow us on Twitter at CHUCKYVISION. Follow the network on Twitter at WMT_network. Our website is wemadethisnetwork.com. The logo was designed by Dev and the theme tune composed by Dark Fantasy Studios. Wanna play?
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you just listened to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Elsewhere on We Made This. The Movie Palace podcast.
So I normally just ask people, Robert, their general thoughts on Alfred Hitchcock. Yeah, what are your thoughts and feelings about Hitchcock?
Well, it's funny because we had discussed, how this talk was going to go today, and I kept thinking, why have I been so interested in Hitchcock? Generally speaking, I'm more interested in the less technical filmmakers, and Hitchcock is such a technical filmmaker.
We dig music.
How come you always refer to Jonathan Donahue as Donahue and you always refer to PJ Harvey as Polly?
Because she's overly familiar with Polly. Right.
Yeah, that could do it.
It freaks me out as well. Like I don't call any of the singers in bands by their first name because I don't know them. I'm not like, oh, there's my mate Johannes from Cult of Luna. No. It's Johannes from Cult of Luna or Johannes Person or, oh my God, it's Johannes Person from Cult of Luna sometimes. Like, that's how I refer to him.
So you're saying that it's sit down Mr. Ulrich instead of sit down Lars?
I think it depends how much I take an artist to heart, and Polly is very, very dear to me. So.
Well, she thinks you're a prick because you don't like Ministry.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast.
But you're not really quite sure what's happened there. It might put you off seeing the next one.
That does make a lot of sense, actually. Good point. All right.
Carl can always give us the information in a way we can make it understand. Me and Mark just go blah 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 blah.
I occasionally sound vaguely intelligent when I try very hard. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I occasionally
I also whine about gay shit. I'm multifaceted.
Okay. Anyway, moving on.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.